This is Chris Report, and he assured me that St. Simon's down in Boulders. Folks, this is Chris Wyatt reporting from South Africa. Servus, bienvenue, bonjour, Hochandet South Africa, Hotsihilijang, Botswana. Welcome back to the program. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania. And maybe I should gray out my background there because Lambert's got his, and there's a huge contrast there. So I'm going to mess with my background here. I just realized how awkward that looks. So blur my background. I think it looks a lot better. Both of us are blurred. Folks, welcome back to the program. And I have with me today AfriForum's Lambert de Klerk. Lambert, Hochandet.
I'm good, thank you, and yourself, Chris?
I'm very well. We're going to talk about a topic today that should be of interest to all South Africans, in fact, to people throughout the world. Last night, in order to fall asleep, I watched a documentary on Antarctica once again, and that documentary reminded me that 2/3 of the Earth's water is tied up in the desert that is Antarctica. And that's an apropos topic, water for South Africa, where, as my recollection, only about 13% of the land is actually arable for crop farming, and water is a perpetual problem. You've got Gauteng province with about 15 million people living in it, and there aren't water resources for 15 million people. The ANC never did finish the Highlands Water Project that the National Party started, and we've got Cape Town, where the climate alarmists are telling you that climate change is the reason why there was no water. And I said, well, the fact that 45% of the water leaks out of pipes before it gets to its destination, there's no brown water reuse set up, and there are 5 million people, not 800,000 people, living in the Cape Town metropolitan basin these days, and it doesn't matter how much rain falls when you have too many people. Anyway, I digress. So there's my opening statement with my guest, Lambert de Klerk from AfriForum. Lambert, you can correct anything that I got wrong there. Welcome to the program, and I'm excited to talk to you today about a big issue for South Africa, water.
No, thank you very much, Chris, for having me, first of all, on your show. And no, you actually put the hammer on the nail. South Africa is a 50 scarcest country in the world for water, or let's say fresh water specifically. And we've got a quite interesting dynamic where a lot of projects are behind schedule on a macro scheme. But if you go look on ground level, there's massive problems. And you also stated correctly that it's roughly 40.8% of clean drinking water, meaning water that's already been processed through water plants and purified. And it's going basically through leaks and losses into the ground or wherever it is. And that is a very worrying thing. So South Africa actually, to a sense, Anthony Turton, I don't want to steal his thunder, but he would normally say that there is quite a lot of water in South Africa. It's just that we are not using it optimally, and secondly, it's being lost. And it's a very worrying topic in South Africa at this stage. I believe that the Eskom and the power crisis that South Africa had with load shedding and still has to this day. Luckily, we've been without load shedding now for I think it's about roughly 2 months, which is great. But the water situation in South Africa is gonna be much, much more chaotic, much more dire. And I don't want to be a doomsday talker, but people in South Africa are naive that we open our taps and believe that the water is clean, firstly, to drink, and then secondly, that there will come water out magically into the taps. Because that's the second part of the discussion is how clean is South Africa's water, meaning the water that you drink out of your taps. Now, in Gauteng, we are luckily, we've got Rand Water, which is one of the better water boards in South Africa, which is a bulk water service provider. And that is very great, but they are under immense pressure at this stage because of municipalities throughout their service area that are not paying for the bills of the water they are supplying, which is a massive problem. And I mean, for instance, the Rand Water said in their 5-year plan for the next 5 years, basically they stated that they've got roughly 5 years of finances left, and then they will be bankrupt if nothing is going to be done regarding the revenue collection from municipalities that they must pay over to Rand Water. So yeah, we've got interesting times ahead of us.
Well, Lambert, I think, in fact, that's a fair statement. You have interesting times ahead of you. Let me just run through a list of just some I don't want to say minor, but I'd say major water issues just in the past several years. Of course, the Cape Town situation, which climate alarmists said was because of climate change. And while climate change may have played a role, it's not the proximate cause in Cape Town's water situation. It's the population, it's the water use. I mean, the per capita usage of clean water or sweet water a century ago is a fraction of what people use today because of industrialization and all the other things taking place, plus the population. On top of that, we had Nelson Mandela Bay, where the reservoirs were at 3% of capacity. That was a crisis. Then we have, of course, the failure to clean the drains in KwaZulu-Natal and the sewage into the drinking system of Taquini, Durban. Excuse me. And then, of course, the current situation in Gauteng, where Rand Water has had to shut down a lot of water supply while they do maintenance on pipes. And if other parts of the project, the Highlands Water Project, have been brought online with alternate lines bringing those things into Gauteng, perhaps that could have been ameliorated. But those are just some of the major ones. We're not even talking about going to the Karoo, where it never rains, or going up to Limpopo or Mpumalanga, where bad weather comes and sometimes you don't get water for a long period of time. I mean, these are real issues that I think people neglect. For years, geostrategic analysts, and I worked in the intelligence community for many years, have been talking about the coming water wars, and they're talking specifically about North Africa and the Middle East. But I mean, this is a situation that affects everyone. Even in America, we have places where, through misuse, the Ogallala aquifer under the Plain States is being drained at a rate that can't be refilled. And that thing was filled tens of millions of years ago. And it'll take tens of millions of years more without drawing all the water out just for it to restore. And then you get sinkholes, you run out of water. I mean, there are so many problems here that people simply neglect. And these are issues, I think, that also are applicable to South Africa.
Yes, definitely, Chris. Maybe to tell an interesting tale about South Africa. So we, as I previously stated, we're the 50th water scarcest country in the world. But what's interesting is that our per capita or per person usage per day water per liters is much higher than the world average. It is around about 280 odd liters a day per person. And we also did a study within, we had a water conference about, it's not even a month. Yeah, it's not even a month ago. It was around about 2 to 3 weeks ago, where we had some of the brightest minds in South Africa to this water conference to discuss the crippling situation and dire situation in South Africa. And what was interesting, we also went to go see our members on AfriForum has roughly around about 315,000 members throughout South Africa, and we wanted to find out from them what is their water usage. And what was interesting is it was on par. We use around about 250 odd. And now when I say we, it's an average of members on a survey we did. And that is right on par. And this was in 2018, the study that was done nationally on the usage of water in South Africa. So there's this naiveness in South Africa that we do not realize, that we should use water more sparingly. I mean, you can go throughout the country, and I can guarantee in most of the country, most households' taps are normal taps. They're not water saving taps, for instance. And that's something interesting. You also stated, like, for instance, in Cape Town. Cape Town was actually at the conference as well, and we asked the city of Cape Town to discuss what happened in Cape Town, but also to what were the measures that they had to put in place. And it was quite interesting. One of the key issues that changed the water situation, or let's say the day zero that was imminent, was they changed the people's behavior on using water more sparingly, which was crazy. I mean, I'm talking under correction, but as far as I remember, the person that presented basically said that they saved 70 megaliters of water per year just by the usage of people and changing their habits on how they use water, as well as reusing water, which was actually something amazing to understand, because I think that's one of the key things that's also part of the problem in South Africa.
No, I agree 100%. In fact, one of the problems in Cape Town is the tragedy of the commons. And I'm not attacking people who live in townships, but we all know, if you've been to a township, you've seen it. In fact, there is a situation where there's typically a communal tap. And guys make a few rand by washing cars, and they run over, they fill their bucket up, and they just leave it running. And these things run for hours, and people come along and fill them, and people are just too lazy or too ignorant of the fact that this isn't an endless resource. They just leave it running. Turn the damn thing off. I mean, that alone, that behavior alone can save an awful lot of water. And the thing is, it's not like the water's coming out of a stream. It's been treated. This is treated water. I mean, and so energy and effort and money and time have gone into making it potable or potable so that you can consume the water, and that's what they do with it. That's real tragic. And another one that that doesn't get much attention in South Africa is brown water reuse. We have that in a lot of places in America. You're probably familiar with that term, in which you take wastewater. It's partially treated, but it's not potable water, but it can be used for cleaning, for watering lawns and things like that. And that really cuts down on wastage of water. But I mean, that's a major problem here, and changing behavior is critical. I mean, I'm a sort of person that I feel guilty if I use the toilet if it's not a urinal, because it's like 15 liters of water to flush the damn thing. I mean, I try to hold it as long as I can, or find a shebeen to stand behind and go.
Yeah, and that's in South Africa. We call it grey water, not brown specifically, but the reference is exactly the same. And there's interesting.
Well, it is grey water. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yeah. Brown water is a maritime term for riverine operations. Yeah. Sorry, I'm an Army guy. It was stuck in my head. So yeah, grey water. That's what I meant to say. Grey water use.
What's interesting as well is there's quite a few studies in South Africa at this stage, and we've spoken to the Water Research Commission, and they were also part of our conference, where we discussed exactly that, the many ways of usage, exactly like you're saying, for instance, flushing a toilet, where they have gone and they're busy with studies, and they actually have prototypes at this stage of waterless toilets and waterless urinals that they are experimenting with, exactly for this reason. And it's a massive problem. And the thing with toilets, I don't even want to go there, but in South Africa, we are polluting the same resource we have to use for cleaning, for drinking. In South Africa, most of our towns are based along river systems. And that is a massive problem, because the one town is polluting at the end of the town with their wastewater treatment works being on basically critical standards, that there's no any form of cleaning taking place, and it runs to the next town, where that town extracts it again for cleaning purpose or for drinking purposes. We've got towns in South Africa currently where there's literally sewage in the water, or E. coli. There's E. coli in people's taps where they open and they have to drink it, and they don't even know it. That's the scary thing about it.
Yeah, because you can't smell it or see it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
In South Africa, there's a few documentations that have been released by the department, and roughly the percentages are roughly accurate. I must now remember just the exact same percentage, but basically, let's say around about 48% of water treatment systems, meaning cleaning for drinking water purposes, are not up to standard, meaning that they are not fit for human consumption. But here's the scarier fact on that. 58% of these municipalities that supply this water do not let the end user know, listen, that the water is not suitable for human consumption. So they don't even do the dignity of letting people know, to say, listen, your water is not up to standard, don't drink it. And yeah, it's a scary situation in South Africa if you have that, and it's more in the rural areas of South Africa. That is something that's very common. In the Free State, the Northwest, that is something that is scarily common at this stage.
Well, of course, in Northwest, it's a province under receivership because it's been managed so poorly by African National Congress politicians, so it's not a surprise. But that is frightening. It has to be a criminal act if you're an authority responsible for safe drinking water and you fail to inform people. I mean, people should be in handcuffs and be taken in and being prosecuted for that. I mean, don't you think?
Yes, definitely. And that's unfortunately one of the problems in South Africa, is that, for instance, I was part of a court case where we laid criminal charges against a certain municipality for water pollution, meaning that they were polluting a river system. And we laid the charges in 2018 and in 2022 only, and we can say now it was COVID, but that is on average the biggest problem, is that it takes so long for these court cases to start and also finish. But basically the municipality in that case, or the municipal manager, just pleaded guilty and had to pay a fine. Here's the scary fact about it. It's been 2 years, it's worsened, and nothing has happened to him. So it is a very scary situation that it takes quite long. And the other thing is that the people that are investigating it are scarily overworked. We call them in South Africa EMIs. They are environmental management inspectors that investigate these kind of issues. And the biggest problem is that they've got so many cases that they have to investigate, because they investigate not just water and water pollution queries and situations. They have to investigate mining queries, etc. And the list just goes on and on and on. And it is to such an extent that they are under immense pressure, and it is a struggle. I can sympathize with them. I know a lot of them. I'm on speaking terms with quite a lot of them, and that is one of the key issues, is that they are very understaffed and overworked, unfortunately. And then it still has to go to the NPA, which is our National Prosecuting Authority, and then they can send it back. So it's a very longsome thing. And by the time that there's actually, let's say, a prosecution, that person is not even in that position anymore, which makes it also difficult, because at this stage in South Africa, they are being prosecuted on the structural person, meaning the municipal manager, not the person itself in his personal capacity, which is very difficult. And which is unfortunate as well, is that the private sector is being prosecuted very more easily and fined a lot easier than the municipal managers and municipal, or let's say state officials in that sense. Because what we've seen, and I've been to a conference where we spoke and sat with these MIs, and I said the biggest problem is that state entities do not want to prosecute other state entities, because this is now the Department of Environmental Affairs that has to prosecute the municipal manager, for instance. And it is a very frustrating thing. I know currently there's roughly around about 57 criminal charges against municipal managers in South Africa that were laid by the Department of Water and Sanitation, which is another department within South Africa, or in our government. And I said to the Director General I was talking to on this, and I said to him, you know what, the biggest problem is that I've been in these court cases. It takes very long, and it's not on the person on his personal capacity. So nobody learns a lesson. At the end of the discussion, it unfortunately is the taxpayer that actually just pays the fine for that municipality, which is quite frustrating. So something has to change on that as well.
100%. So that begs the question. You mentioned a court case, and you just talked about rather knowledgeably about court cases and what happens in South Africa. You're with AfriForum, a civil rights organization. Why are you an expert on water? What's going on there? Is this part of AfriForum's self-bestuur concept? What's going on?
Yes. So within my department, we've got a few focus areas, and one of them is environmental affairs, and then we've also got neighborhood or safety measures, in the sense that neighborhood watches, etc., with community safety, etc. Then we also have local government, which works quite close to my department, which is environmental affairs. And then we also have youth, and we've actually got quite a few of these structures. And it actually, I think, sporadically started getting much bigger within AfriForum because of the overall failure within the state, meaning specifically on municipal level, because we are a community-based organization, and our main focus is communities. But nationally, for instance, I have to focus on that, but I also focus on community solutions. And so it's a broad spectrum of stuff. But I actually studied to be an environmental impact assessors, meaning that you do EIAs, environmental impact assessments, throughout the country. And I don't know, just it's actually landed on my lap, and I've been working for AfriForum ever since. And the water started about 6 or 7 years ago. I realized that there's going to be a massive problem, or maybe a bit longer, but there was going to be a massive problem in South Africa regarding water. Not just because we don't have a lot of it, but secondly, that we could see that there is massive problems ahead of us. We could see this cliff, and we could see there's a crisis on its way. And with that, I started reading quite a lot on law and legislation in South Africa on water and on studies and etc. And here I am.
Well, here, my water is provided by the private sector. It's a co-op, a cooperative. It's technically, you could say it's a state-owned entity, but that's because the local township and municipality purchase the private entity and run it as a cooperative. It's a not-for-profit organization, and the directors are not from the government. They're appointed people in the community who become directors and the board of directors there. And my water is reliable. It's always here. The billing is pretty straightforward. I never have a problem, and our water is all well water, which unfortunately in this area means it's high mineral content. And the impact of that is that it clogs up my lines. I've had to replace my my feeder pipe in my shower a couple of times because it's been jammed up with calcium deposits. I don't drink out of the taps. I mean, I was a farmer. I used to drink out of the taps when I was a farmer, but I don't drink here because of high mineral content. My body has enough to process without adding all that iron and calcium into my stomach. But is that, we talked about water quality there briefly. You brought that up. I mean, that seems to be a major problem across South Africa with the quality of water. You talk about all these places where they're not doing the job, but I imagine it's hard to say just a general statement, because I mean, you're talking about borehole water in some places, you're talking about river fed water in other places, and so South Africa doesn't have any desalination plants that I'm aware of. So I mean, there's multiple sources of water here. But what is the biggest challenge for these providers of water in South Africa? Is it that they're state-owned enterprises? Is it that they're not private? Is it because they are private? Is it because of resourcing? Is it just because of political interference? I mean, there's got to be an overriding challenge for all of them. And it can't simply just be there's too many people, not enough water, because you can manage a finite resource effectively.
Yeah. No, Chris, so it's I don't want to be the wolf that cries about anything in South Africa. Everybody cries corruption, corruption, corruption.
But
but unfortunately, that is probably one of the biggest things that in management, on municipal sector, meaning on ground level or grassroots, that is probably one of the biggest things is maintenance. Nothing is being fixed when it's broken. If it leaks, they leave it leaking. And that's unfortunately one of the key issues. Corruption on itself is ludicrous. I can tell you, for instance, I was involved in a case in Limpopo where there was grant money that had to be allocated to a specific local municipality, and it was roughly around about 63 million, and it was already approved. Like, it was a MI grant, a municipal infrastructure grant, that had to be paid out by province, that was approved by National Treasury, all the departments, and it had to be paid out to this specific municipality, and it wasn't being paid out, and we couldn't understand what's going on, and we wrote a few letters, did a bit of an investigation. And unfortunately, here on the specific province, the person that had to approve and physically just do the payment, meaning had to do a bank transfer of the money, for instance, they didn't want to do it because they didn't get their cut of that 63 million. I mean, that's the kind of things that goes on in South Africa. And unfortunately, the sector has, when talking about the sector, the water sector in South Africa has had on local level specifically, there is a problem with not skilled laborers on the plants, and that even is showed in the Department of Water and Sanitation's Blue and Green Drop report, where they say that a lot of these municipalities are struggling with water service delivery because of there's not enough skilled workers on those plants. And it's not that I'm blaming the finger to the people working on the plant, but because they are trying to do their best. But it's more a thing of that there's mismanagement happening on those ones. And then maintenance is the other big thing, that there's no maintenance being done. And with that comes finances, because a lot of the time the finances aren't being allocated where it should be for budgeting to fix those problems and plan ahead. One of the key issues that we see, and you actually also said it right at the beginning with Cape Town, for instance, that there are many more people moving there. City planning is one of the key aspects in South Africa, specifically when you look at the more urbanized areas in South Africa, like Gauteng or Cape Town. And one of the key things is that you have to vision 10 to 20 years ahead to see, listen, we are going to have more people, meaning that we need more capacity. And that is one thing that is lacking. For instance, the city of Cape Town is at the forefront of this. They are probably 10 years ahead of any other municipality in South Africa, just on capacity building, not just for water, but as well as wastewater. Because with water, and a lot of people don't forget that, it's not just the water you need,
It's what
that you
comes
actually
afterwards.
need. Yeah, you need capacity on the other side. And for instance, in Gauteng, you can just look at Pretoria. Most of the wastewater treatment works here are so far over capacity. It's a joke. They cannot sustain it. One of the plants, I've been on them quite a lot because I live in Pretoria, so it's easier for me here. But they are so far under, they're on so much immense pressure. They're like basically 50% over their capacity, meaning that the water basically just runs through it, the wastewater. They cannot clean it. And they have plans in place, but it takes long to fix up a wastewater treatment works that's been stagnant for so long. It takes 3 to 4 years, and the money that goes with that is even more so. And so, yeah, I went a bit further off the question, but most of the water in South Africa gets provided by municipalities. In South African law, they are the Water Services Authority, meaning that they are responsible for water, and they then can appoint water service providers, WSPs, and like Rand Water is a bulk water service provider, meaning they provide bulk water, and they then get a bill for that, and the municipality then from there has reservoirs where it gets distributed. In smaller towns, you've got the Water Services Authority is also the water services provider in this case. And it's a bit difficult. So there's not a lot of in the private sector. We've got, like, for instance, ACES Water, where you can get bottled water and so forth. But there's not as far as I know, and I've read quite a lot of that because we are investigating it as a company to see how can a community become self-sufficient, and that is it's a very difficult thing to do, and there has been cases in the past, and scenarios, but it was far and in between, and it's a very difficult thing because our law is structured that basically the Department of Water and Sanitation, or the state in this case, is the sole custodian of water, that they almost are the judge, jury, and execution, if I can say it like that. So, but we are in discussions with the Department of Water and Sanitation at this stage. We were supposed to have a meeting last week. It unfortunately had to be cancelled just due to the new minister now being elected for water and sanitation, and now the department has a few things that they have to sort out. But hopefully in the coming week or coming weeks, we are going to have a discussion on that, because we believe that one of the key solutions in this country for communities is a community-based solution where the community themselves fix it themselves and do it themselves, because with that comes political will. In South Africa, for instance, in these local municipalities, one of the key issues is that political will, and political will not in the sense of politically, but in the sense of there has to be a willpower to change. And we believe communities will do that. Why? Because it's close to home. In some cases in South Africa, we've got municipal managers that are a municipal manager for a town or a municipality in Limpopo, but they live in Gauteng. So it's not close to home. They go home at night, they open their tap, and the water comes up, because it's not from their own town where they're supposed to reside or was supposed to run that town as a business. And that is something that we believe should change, that with communities, if you live there, you will change and be willing to change everything and do anything in your power to provide that clean water, because you live there. You have to do that to change. So yeah, it is in South Africa, I don't want to be too negative, but that is probably one of the things. And I want to also invite you, Chris, and that is something you can do in your private time. But we released at our water conference, we released our first water documentary. and it is based on the current situation. So, and we do not speak as a company, as AfriForum. We believe that in order for us to get a broader perspective, we only asked specialists outside of our view what the current crisis is, and what they believe. It's based in four categories, basically. And it's called, the documentary is called Running Dry, A Nation on the Brink. So
that's what I should have called this stream. That's what I should have called this broadcast. Yeah, no, send me the link in WhatsApp, and then I'll add it to the description for this video after we finish the broadcast. So, we got a little far afield from it, but to get back to it, you talked about wastewater treatment, and the lack of maintenance that happens, the lack of investment, and this frustrates me to no end. I'm not the average bear here. I was an Army intelligence officer. I also have a background in community and regional development, and so like the Cape Town managers, I'm looking 10, 15, 20 years down the road. If you want to have an effective society, you have to have a long-term vision on where you want to get and how you're going to get there. It doesn't mean it's going to end up exactly the way you plan, but if you don't have a plan, then you just stumble through life. And as a consequence, you get breakdowns in wastewater treatment plants because they're not maintained, they're not envisioned for expansion or additional ones or upgrades or renewal. And then we get unbelievably horrific third world quality of water issues, and we have embarrassing situations like Hammanskraal, where you have cholera in South Africa, listeria. You have all these waterborne illnesses, E. coli. It is beyond embarrassing. It is entirely preventable. This is an illness no one should get from tap water if you have competent, effective, dedicated officials, and if people are paying for their water usage fairly. I mean, is that an unfair statement?
No, I do believe, so in South Africa, we've got they call it the indigent role, which is people that fall under the average household's income, and they get water they basically get a certain amount of water for free. And that is how our Municipal Finance Management Act is structured, and that gets here's the crazy thing about it, and that's all fine, because we do believe South Africa, one of the key issues is that poverty is a massive issue in South Africa, and we shouldn't be naive to say, no, listen, there's no poverty and joblessness. Sorry, that's the wrong word, but that is key issues as well. And what's a problem is that the municipalities get equitable shares, meaning the money for let's say the amount of water as well as power they get for free from these specific people that earn under yes, now I can't get the right word, under the average amount of salary for the whole of the household. So they are I want to say to the poorest of the poor, and that is fine. The biggest problem is that with that comes a problem that the municipality gets from National Treasury, the amount, let's say, for instance, in inverted commas, that usage of water and electricity is. But
sure, right. The municipality is receiving the money for those below the poverty line. So no one should be going without water, because even though those below the poverty line cannot afford to pay for the water, it's being paid for them on behalf of taxpayers, and then it's disappearing at the municipal level, not going where it's supposed to.
Exactly. That is the big problem. And you also stated regarding how the cholera, for instance, that was in Hammanskraal, and there was about 4 cases in the Free State. And what is the baddest thing for me is that 47 people had to lose their lives on this. And this is, I mean, on something like clean on water.
Somebody should be in jail. Someone should be in jail. This is culpable. It's manslaughter, if nothing else.
Yeah. And that is the sad thing for me about it, because this has happened, and to this date, I can't speak for what the National Prosecuting Authority is going to do. I know that there is an investigation, but people lost their lives because they trusted the system and they trusted the municipality to deliver clean drinking water, and that is a very worrying thing. And you also stated regarding how the wastewater treatment works in South Africa. Oh, now here's a scary fact. So there's roughly around about 850 wastewater treatment works in South Africa. Only 8% of them are at the low risk. meaning 98% of wastewater treatment works are on a medium to high and to critical risk category, which is a scary thing to say the least. I mean, it's so let's say for instance 24% is at a medium risk, so that is still fine. It means it is in a functional state, but there are problems. But when you go to high risk and critical risk, that means that there's nothing. I've been on wastewater treatment works in South Africa where, for instance, in Lydenburg is in Mpumalanga province. There is nothing going on at the wastewater treatment works. It's dry. There's no water coming in. There's no water flowing out. The water is basically being polluted or running out through pump stations in town, which is a scary, scary thing when you look at that. I mean, it's every time I think about it, I tell myself it's scary. And with that, and there's massive problems. It's because the municipalities are not functioning correctly. With that comes industrial effluent, meaning industrial
wastewater from plants and such.
Yes, exactly. That are not being kept in check as well, because with this, so most municipalities have to write a bylaw that says, listen, in our municipality, this is how, for let's say an abattoir where meat is being processed, etc., the water should be that effluent should be treated before it goes to the wastewater treatment works. Why? Blood is not good for bacteria, for the bugs that are on the wastewater treatment works that clean this water. That is one of the key issues. I spoke to a specialist this morning, for instance, on a case where there is citrus that's going into the plant, the wastewater treatment plant, and it's basically acidic. Why? Because it's lemons and oranges and all these kind of stuff, which is almost a microorganism killer. And there's no bylaw in place to say, listen, guys, you have to make sure that your pre-treatment is that there is pre-treatment before it's
occurring.
Yeah, and it's not that I'm blaming finger on the industrial, but they also would not know, for instance, about it because there's no bylaw that says, listen, you have to do this. I'm a farmer. I grow crops, or for instance, I grow lemon trees and oranges and whatever. And as soon as I've made my juice, I didn't know that I had to do a pre-treatment. I'm not a specialist in microbiology. And that's unfortunately part of the bigger problem, is that the municipalities are not, because they are not functioning correctly, it makes that it's almost a snowball effect, that there are more bigger problems because there's no regulation taking place within this.
So, Lambert, let me address something here in the audience for people and for those who watch this in the future. And this is an important thing to mention here. While you'll get people on the political left who will attack AfriForum as a whites-only group and whatever nonsense they come up with, you're tackling an issue that affects every South African and affects them equally. I remember years ago I was in Sandton, and that was when the Tri-Nations was taking place, and I traveled down to Ellis Park. I parked my car at Rosebank. I took the bus, but not safe to go Ellis Park, but went to a Tri-Nations game. But I was staying in Sandton, and we had no water for 3 days there. There was no water in the place I was staying because the water was coming through Alexandria. That's where the pipe was coming in, and there was something wrong. And I laughed at the time. I said, I wonder if the architects of apartheid realized that the water for the richest square mile of Africa goes through one of the poorest parts of the country in Alexandria. The point here is that that's the same water. White people don't fart unicorns and have magical fairy dust and get something better. People can make the argument that people who have wealth, in particular those who are white, may live in upscale neighborhoods and crime is less impacted because they have private security and this, that, and the other. And that they all have a degree of truth to it. It may not, but it might. But we all get our water from the same place, and we've all flushed our toilets, and it's all going to the same place, and it doesn't look like any of it's going very well for South Africa at the moment. The point I'm making here is that water is the same for South Africans. Unless you're on a farm, have your own borehole, you're getting it from the same source, and it goes to the same pipes, and it comes in the same condition. It's not like the water, no, this is going to Lambert's house. Make sure we extra treat these 5 liters and then segregate it in the pipeline so it just gets to Lambert. It doesn't work that way. So this affects everybody, and AfriForum is standing up for every South African. Am I wrong?
No, you're not, Chris. We, for instance, maybe to give a bit of a background, so in 2013, the Department of Water and Sanitation was the last time they released a blue and green drop report. And a blue drop is the drinking quality of water in South Africa for water plants, and they look at the whole of the system, meaning not just the plant itself, but the pump stations, the pipelines, etc. And the same for the green drop focuses on the sewage and those pump stations. And that was the last time that they released it. Since then, AfriForum started conducting our own monitoring tests where we focused on the effluent of wastewater treatment works, meaning we test the outlet of the plant to make sure that the water they are putting back into the system, meaning into the river systems, etc., or the environment, is of good standard, and then to also test the drinking water quality. And for AfriForum as a company, it's physically impossible to do all those tests. It's too expensive. And then secondly, we try and test as many places in South Africa as we can, but we focus on where we have established branches of volunteers that help us do this test. And it is a trace test that focuses on certain aspects. For instance, something like E. coli, fecal coliforms, we focus on nitrates, on the heavy metals, etc. So there's a broad spectrum of tests, and it's a quick indicator test, and we have a agar bacteria that grows that shows that there's E. coli and fecal coliforms, and then that's basically how this test work. And we started conducting that in 2013 every year, and every year we requested the Department of Water and Sanitation, why did it stop? Well, this is a worrying thing. This is part of your obligation to South Africans to make sure that people know what the quality of the water is, etc. And we started doing it in 2013, as I stated, and every year we did it. And then since 2022, there has been a restructuring in the department, and they started pulling up their socks and doing these tests. And we welcomed it with full arms, but we were actually shocked and horrified at the results of it. And if you look at the current government or the past government before this last election, there wasn't a lot of trust within the department to, let's say, for instance, do the right thing, and or not just the department, but the country as a whole, meaning the government, to say, listen, this is the quality of our water, and not edit it a bit to say, listen, the water is actually quite a lot better than it is. They actually went and they said, listen, we have to be honest, this is actually now the quality of our water. And they did that. And for that, we take our hat off to them, because we have heard of in the past that there has been changes in some of the statistics within the water sector, that I'm talking quite far back now. And that was one of the welcoming things that we said, that to say, listen, yes, it's great actually that you guys are publishing these documents, and it's the truth. It's not something that has been changed or altered a bit. And that is one of the things we were quite glad of. And now they are, I'm not sure if they are doing it this year again, but apparently they are in the busy doing the budgeting, etc. of that. We'll see if the new minister doesn't change or reinvents the wheel in that matter. But with us conducting these water tests for the past 10, 11 years, we tested the water of everybody in that town. And as soon as we saw, listen, the water is not up to standard, we went to the newspaper in that specific town to say, listen, this is not to raise propaganda, or to, in Afrikaans they say, spooke op te jag, to create chaos. It's more to say, listen, this water is not suitable.
It's not safe.
Boil your water, because the municipality is not doing it. So we wanted to warn the people, and we warn all the community members. So it's very rightly so that in a lot of instances, we, as a company, we do get flack, but I do believe that is something that's changing in South Africa quite a lot. because yes, we focus on our own community, but when you're in a dire situation, let's say, for instance, I don't want to say civil war, but let's say there's a massive robbery taking place in a community, and there's 3 or 4 houses affected. The first thing to do is to fix your own house, to make sure that your own house is in order, to say, listen, our house is safe. From now on, let's see our neighbor, we can save them as well. And then that's how this should work. And that is why when we're doing these tests, it's not just, yes, we have an obligation towards our members, but it's actually addressing a bigger and larger problem that affects the whole community, whether you're white, black, or whatever. So yeah, that is something that's very, very true that you stated.
And along those lines, the situation with water and wastewater in South Africa, I think this is important to point out, is a team effort. And I'll elaborate in a moment and get your thoughts on that. Mm-hmm. So just a couple weeks ago, I was sitting on the banks of the Vaal River in the Vaal Triangle and talk about poo water, talk about poorly controlled effluent flowing into a water source. The Vaal River is full of nitrates from agricultural runoff. It's full of effluent from sewage and all kinds of stuff. I wouldn't eat any fish out of the Vaal River. I'm telling you that now. And from one morning to the next, I saw the impact directly. You could see it on the water, where the number of those invasive species, water lilies, the water lilies, the invasive species there, they were under control because there was a good current going the first day, but the next morning things were still, and the entire banks on the north side of the Vaal River, just behind me as I was doing video recordings that morning, were full of that crap. It was a mess. The lodge owners and the people who live along the river there have spent tens of millions of rand out of pocket fighting a losing battle, because you can remove all that you want. If you don't stop the nutrients that they feed off of coming into the river and polluting the water, you're never going to win that battle. And if it wasn't for the private landowners, the private lodge owners and hotels and casinos and all the other stuff and farmers along that river, at this stage, the Vaal River would probably be dead. I mean, it takes a team effort. The municipal, the provincial, the national officials have to be part of the solution and be part of what's fixing it here. And in my experience in South Africa, I don't live there, but I travel there frequently. It seems to be lacking in far too many places, this cooperation.
No, definitely. It's actually funny. I actually come from the Vaal Triangle. I was born there, but I was born in the Free State side. I mean,
so you're born on the wrong side of the tracks.
No, the better side. We normally, the people in South Africa tease if you come from the Vaal Triangle. They say we a different breed of an animal.
Well, that's because of all the heavy metals in your drinking water. It's all coming from Sasolburg and from Vereniging and Vanderbilt Park.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town which is a subdivision of Sasolburg. But yes, that is. The water letters is something that was interestingly, so the first water letters in South Africa that was ever, let's say,
identified, spotted?
Yeah, identified, yeah, spotted, was actually in Kruger National Park at a camp called Lower Sabi. There's a biggerish dam right next to Lower Sabi called Sunset Dam, and that's where the first water letters were spotted, and it was in 1980. Roughly around about 1982, roughly. And what was interesting, and I've spoken to Rand Water, because here's the big thing, and you also stated it rightly so, that everybody should be involved, meaning national, provincial, and local level. And when we spoke
private sector.
Yes, and private sector. Yeah, coming with private sector. Apologies. And what was interesting is that we spoke to Rand Water on this, and the person that is at the forefront of that has to fix this water letters issue. And I feel for him, because I think he was almost hung up to dry, they passed him a hospital tackle, meaning he got the ball and his arms were right up and he got hit. And the worrying thing was that Rand Water, the Department of Water and Sanitation nationally said, listen, because of that area of the river, which is called the barrage as a sector in the Vaal River system, that's Rand Water's responsibility, so they have to fix the problem. And I said, but listen, with all due respect, you as the Department of Water and Sanitation nationally, literally your core is water, and you are the custodian of water in South Africa. You have to be involved in this. And what was scary about it is they basically got 2 million rand to address this issue. I'm talking under corrections about the figures, but about a month ago, let's say at the beginning of June, the private sector had already basically put into this problem roughly 15 million rand. Just the private sector. And then I said, listen, but where's the national department? Where's provincial department in assisting in this? Because the problem is that this water lettuce, luckily now it's dying off the winter. I was worried that the winter colder weather, because these water lettuce are very susceptible to cold weather. And I was worried because of the density of it. And you actually saw it as well, Chris. And I'm glad you saw it, because then you can actually understand it as well. The density of how much it was, I thought, yes, it's not going to be enough. The cold's not going to kill it enough, because it's so compacted that the cold's not going to drill into it and kill it. And apparently it is dying off quite a lot. But the problem is that nowhere else in the world has it grown so sporadically, so fast, anywhere else that has been conducted. And I've spoken to quite a few specialists, and nobody else can tell me and say, listen, we've had an instance where in a month's time it grew 100 hectares of this water lettuce. Nowhere else. Which means that there's something else in the water. And then people said, yes, it's sewage. And I said, listen, it cannot just be sewage, because if it was just sewage that's running in there, why hasn't it been seen there 10 years, or let's say 3 or 4 years ago? Because sewage
it's not just sewage. It's also nitrates from fertilizer and things like that. All of that plays a role.
Yes. So I have been in discussions with quite a few people, and I cannot disclose this information here, but I do believe we know as a company who the culprit is. And one of the big things, and Prof. Anthony Turton, who's a water specialist, he actually lives in Australia now. He's immigrated, but he was a massive, and still is to this day, a massive fighter for water in South Africa, and he's very outspoken about the current situation. He also discusses it in our documentary, and he said we have to do a root cause analysis, and it's the biggest thing in South Africa, or in this case, is that everybody says, yes, it's the sewage, but that is the problem. If it was the sewage, then it wouldn't have sporadically grown like it has. And that's why we also believe that is one of the answers to this situation with the water lettuce. But on a broader spectrum, there should be I do believe nationally in South Africa, because we spoke about the cooperation between different spheres of government. And South Africa has 3 spheres of government, basically. We've got the community, we've got the political side, and then we've got the administrative side. And I do believe at this stage in South Africa, nationally, there is a cooperation. When talking to AfriForum, we are on the brink of having good cooperation with the Department of Water and Sanitation. And I do believe that the coming times are going to exactly put that to the test, because the situation in South Africa with water is so dire that ego should be let go. There has to be a political will as well as an administrative will, and an administrative will, and then also a community will to change this. And it's time to collaborate on this and stop all these egos that get in the way of this because of politically affiliated people, etc., to fix a solution for this. And we as a company believe that a part of this key issue and addressing it is the community. We've got specialists in South Africa within AfriForum that has many years in the water sector, and we have told the Department of Water and Sanitation, listen, these guys will be at your disposal. We want to assist, and we actually want to ask for instance, for a pilot project to see if it is possible for a community not to govern themselves. That's not the purpose, but to see if there is a community-based solution for the water problem in that specific community. So yeah, that is in a sense. There was a case that I'll send it to you as well afterwards, that was quite interesting in a place in Northwest called Costa, which is part of Nicklin River local municipality, where the community got in court order to basically do their own water service delivery and wastewater service delivery. They did it in 2020, but they at the end of 2020 they got the court order. And in January, they basically, I want to say, took over the water and wastewater treatment plant. They didn't have water before that for, let's say, maybe a year to 2 years on end, that there was disruptions in water service delivery. Within a month from taking over, they started having water in their taps continually. And we assisted them quite a lot in that for about 3 or 4 months before the court said, no, we have to give it back. But we were on the brink of getting blue and green drop status on these water and wastewater treatment plants. And here's the sad thing about it. When the court said we have to give it back, the municipality pitched up at the water treatment plant, and I was there personally with one of my colleagues. And we said, okay, that's fine. Let's just make sure that we'll give it to you tomorrow. We're just going to make sure that all the reservoirs are full, all the storage dams are full for water, etc. Within 24 hours, the town was without water again.
Wow. That's sad. But we haven't even touched on a couple topics, and time is running short. But one of the topics that we probably should touch on briefly here is water in the agricultural sector. I mean, even if you're just raising sheep in the Karoo, they have to drink water. But also for traditional crops like wheat and maize, this stuff requires a lot of water. And now if you happen to grow rice, that's even more water intensive, but we're not seeing much of that in South Africa. But then you have almond groves, all sorts of things. So is this a significant problem, or is much of that water drawn from like the Orange River or the Vaal River, God forbid, or from boreholes for agriculture? And is there any concern? Like I mentioned, now this is a crisis that Americans are punting down the road. The Ogallala Aquifer is a massive aquifer that's under the plain states of North America, and we have been overdrawing water from that for 6 decades, and it is running lower and lower. If they continue to withdraw water from there over the next century, eventually that aquifer is going to dry up. That's insane. Is there any risk of that sort of thing happening in South Africa, or is agriculture that's being done for crops at this stage, is it sustainable at its current level? Because population continues to grow and people need food.
It's a very I want to say difficult question to answer, and then secondly also a very I have to answer it very carefully in the sense, because a lot of times in agriculture in South Africa, they call it the boer in Afrikaans. Unfortunately, the term boer is a very sensitive word in South Africa, just politically, and it's connected to, for instance, white Afrikaners, unfortunately, and in that sense, a lot of times we get blamed for a lot of things. So that's why I'm saying I have to just answer it quite carefully. But so one of the biggest consumers of water in South Africa is the agricultural sector. That is so. It's roughly around about 60%, if I'm not mistaken. And I do believe that it is also under immense pressure because of water, because of the change in climate with that a lot of towns get less water, agricultural areas get less water, and they go through droughts, etc. And that puts the agricultural sector in under immense pressure. And with that, which is also a big thing, is that a lot of our crops are being exported out of South Africa, which also makes it a massive problem, because the river systems that they are using most of the time are being polluted, and these things, these crops are being tested for things like E. coli, etc. And that also makes a ripple effect that we are in a problem with not just financially in South Africa, meaning that for exports, but also it puts those farmers under immense pressure that they cannot sell their crops, which puts the families under pressure. And that is a massive thing in at this stage, I would say. And we do believe that there should be not more regulation, but a lot of times they are changing the National Water Act as well as the National Water Services Act in South Africa at this stage. There's an amendment bills to it because of, in South Africa, we have a term called existing lawful use, meaning that before apartheid, all water that was not registered, you have an existing lawful use if you had a dam, etc. And one of the key things now is to say, listen, we have to register these dams on farms, not to regulate you as a farmer, but just to make sure that this is where there is water, for instance. So they are in the process of registering all these unregistered dams, etc., or boreholes, and so forth. And that is one of the key things. The other key thing is that, for instance, with boreholes, just here in the north of Pretoria, there was there's a farming community it's the Apis River area. Yeah. And there the guys can't even extract the borehole water anymore because it's filled with E. coli, because the river system is being polluted so badly. And that's just south of Hammanskraal, for instance. And they can't farm there anymore because they can't sell their crops. And the water's so bad there that if they put it on the crops, it physically burns the crops. That's how high the E. coli counts and fecal coliforms counts are. So it's becoming a big problem. The other thing now, and that's something that we've exposed yesterday, for instance, is that there's a case in South Africa now that has come to our attention where they call it a PDI, a previously disadvantaged individual, meaning most likely a black person that has been previously disadvantaged with water, where there is they have a water license now to farm with, specifically for farming purposes. And this person has now, I just have to talk carefully because I don't want to say their names in this case, because we're still investigating and we're going into a court case now. We're going to bring in a review application in court. But he has a mentor, which is a white farmer. But the two farms where they are busy farming at this stage, the black farmer's farm is a few kilometers away from the white farmer. And now the black farmer wants to actually have more crops, so he's going to rent from his mentor on the other farm, but that farm does not have a water license, and they then wanted to transfer the water license to the white farmer, not for his gain, but specifically for the black farmer to do specific crop or specific agricultural activities there. And the department said, sorry, it was the Free State Department of Water and Sanitation basically said, no, sorry, we cannot give a water license that is a PDI, meaning a previously disadvantaged, to a non-previously disadvantaged individual, meaning a white person. That's currently a case in South Africa now, and we expose it now, not for the case that we want to expose it for the reason that there might be other farmers that are in the same situation, because that is actually, and for instance, the consultant that brought this case to us, he said to us, it's mind-boggling for him. He says he cannot understand something like that just because you are basically discriminating against one person that's actually helping the black person because they are white.
Well, this is what happens when racism is your modus operandi and you play this game of historically disadvantaged. My ancestors were enslaved in the Caribbean who were Irish. I don't expect any special favors or privileges for that. It's just nonsense. This is the nonsense that comes with racialization of society, and that's what the ANC has done. They're no better than the National Party when it comes to this. They pretend they're not, and it's ridiculous. I mean, a couple of years ago, one of the teams won the semifinal in netball, and it was fantastic. I watched the game. They're all excited. And one of the few netball games I watched online. I see it occasionally when I'm in the region in person. But this game, they won, but then they forfeited. And we're like, why'd they forfeit? It was an incredible game. They forfeited because there weren't enough white players on the court. One of the black players was injured, and there was no one else could go in, and so a white player went in. Or, I'm sorry, no, not enough. Yeah, not a, one of the white players was injured. Yeah, one of the white players is injured, and there was another white player, so they put a black player back into the game, and then because they didn't have enough white players, I mean that's stupid. It shouldn't matter whether you have enough white players or black players. It should matter that you have the best players on the court. And it's the same thing with the water. It shouldn't matter that he's renting land from a white farmer. This PDI, the fact that such a thing exists, is racist in its very basis, but that's a political thing. I want to address one thing before we wrap up here. And I've seen this firsthand coming from Hartbeespoort Dam. God forbid I would never dip my toe in that water these days. But I've also seen the downstream effect of it, looking at the irrigation trenches that come from there going north into Northwest Province, just north of Brits. I've watched the water come through there through the sluices. And it is vile and disgusting looking. And I talked to a farmer there who's a friend of mine. He said, when we were kids, we played in this. I'm like, don't put your kids in that, man. You know, you might come out looking green. It's really sad. And this is a problem that South Africa needs to address. And needs to address it yesterday, not next year, yesterday. So in the final moments here, Lambert de Klerk from AfriForum, any final thoughts, or maybe you got a good thing? There's some good news to tell us about. Maybe someone actually is looking long-term about water in South African sanitation. So any final thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yes, it's funny, Chris, I actually swam in the Vaal River system as well, there in Sasolburg, where you had that water letter. So I swam there in as a child. And final thoughts, I do believe that we can change the steer of this ship, but that would all depend on collaboration, and there should be will to change. And yeah, AfriForum as a company, we are looking at that change, and we believe that, and we have to. Kali Kriel, our CEO, always says that we can't plan for just next year. We have to plan for the coming 10 years from now, and that is why all our basis of focus is on the 20 years from now, the 30 years from now. An interesting fact, maybe to close on with the Hartbeespoort Dam that you spoke of, because you saw it. If they had to stop all the sewage that's running into the systems that goes into the Hartbeespoort Dam, they say it would take around about roughly 30 years for the Hartbeespoort Dam to be clean. And that's maybe a food for thought.
Whoa, 30 years, just that's how bad things, that's, I'm thinking like you shut off the nitrates that flow into the Fall River, you shut off the sewage, and I'm thinking because that water is flowing, that'll all be cleaned out, in a couple of years, it'll be clean. But wow, because I guess part of this that people probably don't realize is that all of that stuff that's flowed into there, much of it is settled down into the base of the dam. And that's probably part of what we're talking about here. That's pretty scary. And you know what? The people responsible for that should be prosecuted. I mean, this never should have been allowed to happen. That was an amazing location for recreation, for water source and resources. It was a beautiful place. Lots of luxurious homes were built around that lake. And I don't even want to go near it now. It's just a mess.
Luckily, nature is an amazing thing. I mean, it takes a microscopic bug to clean wastewater, and it thrives on that. And that's why my sewage is also, I love sewage. It sounds weird, but it's just the basis of getting your mind around. There's a small little bug or slug, basically, that is actually, it thrives on cleaning bad water. So hopefully it won't take 50 years, but a lot shorter. And I do believe that nature always finds a way to sort itself out. Unfortunately, the human is just the biggest problem in this situation with nature.
Ain't it the truth? We seem to be the problem. We're the virus. The Homo sapiens are the virus at times. But no, it's fascinating. You're right. Microbes just eat apart petroleum from oil slicks. They consume it and clean the water. It's amazing. Anyway, it's been a fascinating conversation, Lambert. I'm really glad that we had a chance to meet when I was at AfriForum last time. And just briefly, we just chatted. And that's where this conversation grew out of. And perhaps we'll have you on back again sometime to talk about maybe progress or a specific project that's taking place, or maybe a case after it's over. I know you can't talk about legal cases while they're ongoing, but I want to say bye donkey. I appreciate your time and wish you a pleasant weekend. And is it fair to assume? Well, no, it's not fair to assume you grew up in the Vaal Triangle, so I don't know if you're a Cheetahs fan or a Bulls fan or what's going on.
I'm actually a Stormers fan.
Right. Okay. Lambert is welcome back on the program anytime.
Okay, perfect. No, my father supported them all his life, and it's basically just stuck. But at this stage, I support any South African team. I love sport as a whole. I do believe it's something that every person has in common, and we forget about our problems for that hour and a half. For instance, tomorrow I cannot wait for the Springboks to play. So, I'm looking forward to the rugby tomorrow.
Well, I agree with you. We do forget about it for that 2 hours, but once the Bulls attempt to score in extra time, about 2 meters out, failed at Loftus as I sat in the press box, I quickly remembered my troubles moments later.
But luckily, if you're Irish, we're playing against you tomorrow.
No, I have Irish ancestry. I'm a Viking. That's just one little piece of my ancestry.
Well, okay.
So yeah, no.
I just wanted to make sure.
Oh no! Look, you don't know me. Obviously, I'm a Bok fan. I have been since 1982. We didn't have a national side, so I picked South Africa back then. And I've been a Stormers and Province fan. Been a Province fan since then, and a Stormers fan since they came into existence.
Oh, that's great.
But ultimately, I'm a South African rugby supporter. So I do live broadcast of the Currie Cup, of the URC games, and all test matches.
That's great.
Yeah. So I actually missed the Crick was this morning. I would have broadcast the color commentary and play-by-play, but I was being interviewed. And we're going to wrap up because I have to do a quick news program at the top of the hour. And then after that, I think the Lions are playing at 1 o'clock, so I'll be on my rugby channel doing that.
Nice. All right. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the time.
It's my pleasure.
Have a nice weekend. Thanks.
Likewise. All right. Cheers. All right, folks. Lambert de Klerk taking off here and dropping out of the stream. He's from AfriForum and has helped us with, there he goes. He's helped us with understanding the situation with water issues in South Africa. And not just that, beyond that, also the sanitation concerns that we have about the water. We touched on Hammanskraal, Hartbeespoort Dam, the Fall Triangle, Cape Town, Durban, Nelson Mandela Bay, even briefly on agricultural water usage there towards the end. So thanks a lot to Lambert. My appreciation for that. I hope the audience enjoyed it. Feel free to leave a comment behind, folks. This is a sort of story that just doesn't get enough attention. It needs it, and it'll get attention when everybody's getting cholera all over South Africa and there's no safe water to drink, and plants are dying as a consequence. Then people will take a look at it. Link to the rugby channel. It's at Rugby Ascendant. Is Hendo here? I don't know who's in the chat. I didn't see if Hendo was here. Let me go get it for you very quickly here, and then I'll wrap up. So let me see. At Rugby Ascendant. There we go. Okay, good. Make sure that's it. All right. I haven't set up the stream for that game yet. I will do that. I just haven't done it yet because it's been a busy morning. And last week I published all of my rugby streams 4 or 5 days in advance, and then YouTube ignored me and shadow banned me, and nobody showed up for the Ireland game, which really pissed me off. Only a handful of people. So we're taking a different approach this week. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Be sure to join me for the news here shortly. I don't know if I'll start at the top of the hour. It might be quarter after because I need to get set up for it, and we'll have a conversation. And then I got to get rugby going at 1 o'clock. So, all right, have a good evening. Thanks to Lambert. Appreciate it. Y'all take care, and we'll see you here hopefully shortly. Cheers.